This was not great. This was obviously not an inspiring type of window in terms of both the results and the performance. And as we've mentioned time and time again, being that this is the last time we will see this team, that's not a great way to go out. Now, the fact that these games were held over in Europe, Greg Berhalter was very clear that that was in an effort where the majority of players playing in Europe don't have to travel as much. I will point out that a flight from London to Doha is 6 hours, okay? Roughly the same amount from London to, let's say, New York. The sterile environments for both of these games were certainly not conducive and not an approximation of anything close of what a World Cup environment is going to be. And when you juxtapose them with what we saw in the Nations League, not great. Having said that, I think we have more questions than answers after this window. It's not all doom and gloom. The sky is still not falling. Some of those questions we had even before the window, they just have not been answered, and maybe some others have come along. Mosse, initial reactions to this game, but also to the window.
Yeah, if this window was about generating excitement and generating momentum towards the World Cup, then it was absolute disaster, because I agree with you. Today was also a very poor performance. The only reason they didn't lose is because Saudi Arabia is not as good as Japan. I know they finished above them in qualifying, but they were missing some of their best players today, so they weren't able to capitalize on some of the US's flaws in the same way that Japan did. And yeah, if it was just about intensity, it'd be one thing, but I do think there's some real personnel, philosophical issues when you consider the fact that, Rob Stone and I were talking at halftime, and at that point, each of the center forwards had played exactly 45 minutes, and their numbers were all putrid across the board. Ferreira, first half against Japan, only 14 touches. Sargent, second half, only 15 touches. And then Pepe in the first half today, only 12 touches. So now that's 3 different players in this system that are struggling to get involved in the game. So at what point is it not the player and is it the system?
Yeah, and then look, after the first game against Japan, I think a lot of us were screaming and yelling about the inability to be flexible and to adjust to what the game gave the U.S. I actually think the U.S. came out in this game, and certainly from a tactical perspective, the way that they played the long balls, especially those diagonal balls, either from a center back to an outside back who had pushed up, or a center back over the top to Weston McKennie, whom he must have made 20 runs from that midfield, and obviously had been told to do that. And they were good runs. So in that sense, that adjustment was important. The field, again, wasn't great, and so therefore it didn't lend itself necessarily to playing out of the back. And those long balls were on, especially with a Saudi Arabia that likes to play that high line. That's great. The problem is, so you solved one problem, but you either have created another problem or the next problem in line steps up. And that was the inability, once those balls got out wide, to have any consistency of service and any quality of service. And we saw Clint Dempsey after the game. There was some video that we were showing where it's not that you didn't get into these positions, but then those final balls were poor. And someone like Ricardo Pepi, who gets this moment to shine, I as much as I don't like feeling bad for strikers, in this case, I can understand how frustrating it may be where you're not even getting service to do what you are asked to do. And I know we kind of want him to do more than just get on the end of balls out there. But so Greg Berhalter at the end of the game said that this was a nervy type of window. And I get that players are nervous in that they're not on the team and they think that, one bad step or one bad ball and I'm not going to be on that plane. I get it. But as I said at the end on our broadcast, if you're nervous now, if this is nervy now, then what the hell are you going to do when you get in front of 1 billion people playing at the World Cup? And I know the environment and circumstances will be different, but we expect more than just making the team for players. We expect more than just making and qualifying for the World Cup, regardless of what happened last time around. And we expect more than just even getting out of the group here. So you're going to need, nervy isn't going to cut it now or in the World Cup. You're going to need ballsy. And unfortunately, that ballsy swagger that we've come to associate with his team was rarely evident in these two games.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.